Hi, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to my next instalment of working my way through the Daniel Smith colours. Usual caveats apply, so don't bother fucking commenting. No, I'm not doing every single colour because the swatch charts I'm working from are a few years old, I think, don't contain every single colour. I don't think they've ever released every single colour in spot card form. They also obviously retire and create new colours all the time. So some of the colours in here are no longer available. Others are not on here because they weren't available at the time this was made. I am missing out the Primatech colours because I've covered those in separate videos. You can watch those up there in the iCards. And additionally, I'm missing out the Lunar colours, to which they've added black, basically, because I'm going to cover those separately at the end because I want to do all the Lunar colours together. So I'm also prone to mistakes and missing out colours, so if I realise I've missed something out, I'm going to shove it on at the end of the video. And there comes my last caveat, which is that I'm usually in these videos, I do 32 colours. I'm doing 31 in this video because in the last video I did 60, my usual 32, and I realised I'd missed out Quin Rose, so I added that at the end of the video, and that buggers up my swatch chart slightly, so I just decided the easy thing to do was to just do 31 today, and that fills up 2 sheets of paper. So I'm using, as always, Aquafresh, that's toothpaste, Aquafine hot press watercolour paper, which is bloody awful. It's a cheap student grade paper, very affordable, great for swatching, and I like it for that reason. And I'm using a sheet of that, and I have drawn on 3" by 2" grid to give me my 16 on each sheet. It's not quite perfect. The bottom row and the last column are slightly bigger than the others, but that does not matter at all. I have got these black patches for transparency, which are Spectrum Noir True Black alcohol marker, but any alcohol marker in black will do that. It's just the one that I happen to have to hand when I did it, and I vary that with pretty much every video because it depends what I've got to hand. I'll be painting using a size 8 Prolene Plus brush from ProArt today. Love these brushes, they're beautiful, really well balanced, and I could not recommend them more. Really, really affordable, and very much like painting with a very expensive fur, and they come to a really, I don't know if you can see that, they come to a really fine point, and this is dry. So there's a dry brush coming to a really sharp point, so when wetted, there you go, you get an amazing point. So paint them in my usual way, dry them and talk about them at the end. I want to cut in before I start and just show you the ones I swatched last time were the reds, or some of the reds, and I just want to show you the granulation on that Potter's Pink there, because it has to dry to give you the granulation. That is true of all granulating colours, they have to dry to give it your granulation. Mayan Red has a beautiful granulation now dry, as does Mayan Violet, that you can't see, but there it is, there's Mayan Violet, beautiful granulation again. And they're all very, very pretty. And then the purples and some of the blues that I did last time, just to show them to you, where we have granulation on that nice Cobalt Violet there, and we also have it on the Cobalt Violet Deep, which is fantastic. All of the ultramarine combinations, Cobalt Blue Violet has a nice granulation. Moon Glow is really nice with the green coming out of the mix, and the same happens with Shadow Violet, and we also get granulation with Mayan Blue Deep there. So I just wanted to show you those because you can't see them when they're wet, you have to wait. So in all these videos, the next video shows what they look like dry. So let's start by zooming in, and the first thing we're going to paint is Smalt Genuine. Now I don't know if this is still available because I can't find it on Daniel Smith's website. I know it got moved over to the Primatech series. I don't know if they're still manufacturing it. I have no idea. Now all the swatches were wetted with the dot, just a dot on a brush about 5 to 10 minutes ago, so we'll see how well they lift now. Now Smalt is powdered glass. This is PB32 Smalt, which is a chromium glass, the blue glass that you sometimes still see. Don't see it quite so much anymore. And it is a bit of a bugger to lift because it's very hydrophobic. Glass is a silicate, so silicates, remember, silicates and phosphates are the ones that are hard to lift and are very hydrophobic and tend to granulate really, really well. So I'm just sort of scrubbing that back and forth. It is quite a pale, transparent colour, that is how it's advertised. It is a transparent, granulating, non-staining colour, and it does not have a rated ATSM light fastness, but Daniel Smith have predicted the rating would be 1 if it did have one. So you go, you can see that granulating up already because it's a silicate and they granulate like mad. Right, ultramarine blue next, which is a mildly staining or moderately staining, granulating, transparent, light fastness 1 colour. And this is a really beautiful ultramarine blue. I really like this one. You can see that starting to granulate already. Obviously, granulation of the sedimentary type works better on a cold press paper, but that's why I use hot press, because it shows a little bit. Now, French ultramarine traditionally was synthetic ultramarine, and it sort of came to mean over time the slightly more reddish, purplish shades. It's actually my preference. I actually prefer the French ultramarines, the more purple ultramarines. So you can see you've got a more neutral and a more purple. They're still both warm colours, but it's a very subtle difference. Just what I prefer is that one. Next cab off the rank is Cobalt Blue over here, and this uses PB28, which is Cobalt Illuminate Blue Spinel, aka Cobalt Blue. It is granulating, semi-transparent, low staining, and light fastness 1. And I like Cobalt Blues. They're really nice for skies because they're not too warm. They're not as mad as phthalo blues are. They're not as cold as cerulean blues, and they're not as warm as ultramarines. Cobalt Blue is a near as damn it neutral blue usually. Phthalo Blue Green shade next, which uses PB15:3, which is Phthalo Green BGS. It is light fastness 1, heavily staining, non-granulating and transparent. Huge pigment load, huge staining properties there, and I'm just going to put some water on and bring it together and let it flow because I think the easy way with phthalocyanines to see just how well they sort of spread and produce cloudy effects, because that's what we often use them for, is to just let them move. And that doesn't have a lot of movement, but it's a very pretty shade. Verditer Blue next. Now this is a sort of fake verditer. It's mimicking the hue of verditer, I suppose. It's a granulating, semi-transparent, low staining, light fastness 1 colour, and it is a mixture of PB28, which is Cobalt Illuminate Blue Spinel, aka Cobalt Blue, same as the single pigment Cobalt Blue we've just seen, mixed with PB36, which is Cobalt Chromite Blue Green Spinel, which we're going to see in a moment in a single pigment paint, and PW4, which is Zinc Oxide White. So you could make this yourself. All you have to do is mix those 2 blues and a zinc mixing white, and you can fake this one. I have a tube of this, I have faked it. It's really easy to mix this one yourself. There's nothing special about it at all. That one can be completely mixed yourself. So don't feel if you like that colour you have to buy it. You can just mix it yourself, and if you want you can mix it straight from the tubes and put it straight into a palette and have it, you know, as if you were using it from a tube. Next up is the other Phthalo Blue, the one that no one really seems to use, which is Phthalo Blue Red shade, which is a non-granulating, transparent, heavily staining, light fastness 1, PB15:1, Phthalo Blue RS. And this is the warmer of the Phthalo Blues. Nice for skies, doesn't make very nice greens. It's too warm. It's still a cool blue, but it's sort of too warm for making very, very vivid greens, but it can be useful for skies, I think. And again, I shall let that one sort of mingle on its own because I want to see what the flow is like. Much more of a neutral blue than the other. Next up we have Prussian Blue here, which is using PB27 Prussian Blue, which is granulating, moderately staining, transparent, and light fastness 1. Very useful blue is Prussian Blue. One of the sort of almost invaluable mixing blues. I think it's a must-have for me. I have to have Prussian Blue. I actually prefer Antwerp blue, which is a modified Prussian blue, but that's a nice one. It's not too green. I'm actually going to flip this upside down because it makes it easier for you to see this row more clearly. So next we have cerulean blue, which is a granulating, semi-transparent, non-staining light fastness one, and it uses PB35, which is cobalt stannate, also known as cerulean blue. And this is one of those colours that I like on its own, but I don't really bother having it because I don't really find a use for it. I would rather use cobalt blue, and maybe if I needed it to be semi-transparent, I'd add a bit of white. It's not a colour I find very useful, but that's a pretty one. It's not too vivid. It's nice and subtle, nice and soft, quite nice. Next one is cerulean blue chromium, as they call it, which uses PB36, which is cobalt chromite blue-green spinel, aka cobalt chromite. It is granulating, semi-transparent, low staining, light fastness of 1. And this is a much more intense sort of cerulean. And I quite like that. That's a nice one for skies. Next paint is a magnesium blue hue. So I'm just going to run the ones that I put extra water on to watch them bleed. I just want to let them run around a bit because they're sort of pooling. Okay, so magnesium blue hue here. Magnesium blue is great for skies and snowy ground. And this is a hue because it's not manufactured anymore, although there are, I think Old Holland and Wallace Seymour both sell the real thing still. I have never found a hue that resembles the real thing, so this will be interesting. It's granulating, transparent, moderately staining, light fastness 2, and it uses PB15 phthalocyanine blue. Important point, that's usually light fastness 1 and not granulating. So what have they done? They've added lithopone, which is a white extender. It always lowers the light fastness and it always adds granulation, and it's what is used to make manganese blue hues. Yeah, and they have, I can tell. The moment I move the paint, you can just tell that's been added. Now this is similar in hue to manganese blue. I think they've done a reasonable attempt at getting the hue right. The granulation doesn't really bear resemblance so far, but we'll see what it's like when it's dry. Manganese blue has got a really intense flocculating granulation that makes big clouds. That hasn't done it yet, but we'll see. Next we have Cobalt Teal blue, which is light fastness unrated, but probably 1. It's granulating semi-transparent, non-staining, and it uses PG50, which is cobalt titanate green spinel, aka cobalt titanate green. This is a really nice sort of tealy blue and very pretty. It's exactly the shade that I associate with Jen Maguire's channel because she loves this colour. And those who've seen when I talk about the Kuretake Ganzai Tambi watercolours, there is a paint this sort of shade in that set, and I always say it's Jen Maguire in paint format because I associate this colour with her so strongly. It's a nice colour, not sure what I'd use it for, but it's pretty. Next we have Phthalo Turquoise, which is non-granulating, transparent, heavily staining, light fastness 1. It uses PB15-3, phthalocyanine blue-green shade, and PG36, which is phthalocyanine green-yellow shade. Be warned, there are better Phthalo Turquoises on the market that are single pigment. There is a pigment that is Phthalo Turquoise, and then there are a lot of these mixtures out there that approximate it. You could mix this yourself. This is entirely, if you have the 2 single pigments, you could just mix this. So it's not worth buying colours like this one if you've got phthalo blue yellow shade, phthalo blue green shade and phthalo green yellow shade. You could just mix that. Absolutely nothing to stop you. I wouldn't bother buying it at all. I don't think there's any reason to own those colours. If it was a single pigment phthalo turquoise, that's another story. Next up is so-called ultramarine turquoise, which is granulating, transparent, low staining, light fastness 1. And this is just a mixture of ultramarine, PB29, with PG7 phthalocyanine green blue shade. So again, if you've got the two single pigments, you could mix this. There is nothing special about it at all. It's very similar in hue to Cobalt turquoise. It's just going to granulate, and that's going to make it a little bit more interesting. But you could just make this yourself, and most people would just make it themselves. I noticed when Daniel Smith, they've got a huge range, and a lot of them are just convenience mixers. Many of them made to look like they're amazing, like Undersea Green and Moonglow, that you get the impression from the way they market them like you couldn't possibly mix it yourself. But I've mixed every single one of them without problems with the same properties, so I think it's bollocks. I think anyone can mix them yourself. Next up we have Cobalt Turquoise, which is granulating, semi-transparent, non-staining, light fastness 1, and this uses PB36, which is Cobalt Chromite Blue-Green Spinel, aka Cobalt Chromite. So this is very similar to what is used in the cerulean blue chromium. It's just that this is obviously a different preparation of it that has a different sort of hue to it. It's a nice turquoisey green, or turquoise if we're being really proper, because it's a French word originally. But the sorts of people who say turquoise are the sorts of people who also say restaurant rather than restaurant, and similar affectations. I do pronounce foreign words correctly, but turquoise got assimilated to turquoise so many hundreds of years ago, I don't think that's quite necessary anymore. Next we have Cascade Green, which is one of those convenience mixes, and this is a mixture of PBr7, oopsie, just off camera there, PBr7 brown iron oxide and PB15, one of the phthalo blues, but I don't know which one. It's granulating, semi-transparent and moderately staining, and has a light fastness of 1. Now this is not a convenience mix I'm familiar with, but it's pretty. I think that could be a useful mix, but again, I'd probably make it myself. It's a bit like mixing phthalo blue with yellow ochre. You get a similar sort of green doing that. Next we have Viridian. Viridian is hydrated chromic oxide. It is granulating, transparent, non-staining and light fastness 1. This is one of the must-have mixing greens. I mean, you'd never use this on its own, but you mix it with other things to make useful greens. This is a little bit of a neutral Viridian. A lot of Viridians have got more of a blue cast to this than this. I think this one is a little bit more of a neutral green. Many Viridians are much more blue than that, but it's pretty nonetheless. Next we have Phthalo Green Blue shade, which is transparent, non-granulating, heavily staining, light fastness 1, and uses PG7, which is Phthalo Green Blue shade. And this is very intense, as always, as it should be. I'm going to again see how well it flows, because with the phthalos being so intense, I like to apply them to wet paper and let them do their own thing. So I'm kind of doing that in the test with them. I don't bother with other colours. It's only the phthalos that I'm really interested in what they do when very diluted, how thin you can get them really. Last, Prussian green on this row. This is not Prussian green. Prussian green is something quite different. This is a mixture of Prussian blue, PB27, and PY35, cadmium yellow. It's granulating, semi-transparent, moderately staining, and has a light fastness of 1. It does approximate the hue of true Prussian green pretty well. It's perhaps a little bit too blue. The granulation is lovely. It's there already, but it's nice. It is darker and more blue than true, genuine Prussian green, but it's nice. Next we have another hue. Sorry, just dropped my brush. It happens every video. Won't be a moment. I've got my brush. I've just knocked my having footwear issues now. There we are. So Terra Velta should be PG23 Green Earth, Terra Velta. This is a mixture of Viridian up here with brown iron oxide, and I don't know how well this will approximate Terra Velta. Well, it's got the sort of very thin, not really lifting very easily property of Terra Velta Genuine. The hue is not dissimilar. Not sure how it would behave in mixtures compared to the real thing. I think it would probably mud very easily. It doesn't quite have the tone or the granulation of real Terra Velta, but useful mixture. Nice earthy green. Cobalt green pale now, which is granulating, transparent, non-staining, and light fastness 1. And this uses PG17, cobalt zinc oxide, often known as cobalt green. Oxides, like the silicates and phosphates, can be a little harder to re-wet, so this one is no exception to that. Pigment load does not seem very strong. The spot has dissolved, so it's not a case that I haven't lifted it. It's just a nice pale cobalt green. I will add a bit more later. Next we have True Cobalt Green, which is PG50 Cobalt Titanate Green Spinel, aka Cobalt Titanate Green. It was an unrated but light fastness 1, low staining, granulating and semi-transparent. And this one lifts beautifully easily. The Spinels generally do. And that is a really nice, useful green. Granulating but fresh and lively, and I like that a lot. I could find that useful for fields in the distance, that kind of thing. Spring Green now, one of the many convenience mixes here, which is a mix of 3 colours. It's non-granulating, semi-transparent, low staining. It uses PY53, which is nickel antimony titanium yellow rutile, PG36 phthalocyanine green yellow shade, and PY151 benzimidazolone yellow H4G. This is a really vivid acid green. Pretty, but you don't often see things in nature that are that vivid. Very occasionally you might, and it's got so many different colours, different pigments in it. I'm just unsure how useful that would be. I'm going to flip upside down now. More mixes. Permanent Green Light. This is non-granulating, transparent, low staining, light fastness 2. It's a mixture of PY3, Hansa Yellow 10G, and PG7 phthalocyanine green blue shade. So total convenience mix. There's no need to own this. Again, it's a very acid, vivid green. Could be grass on a spring day. It's a little bit less mad than the last one, but you could mix that. It's just phthalo blue and lemon yellow, basically. You could mix that. There's no need to buy that. Next, phthalo yellow green, which is almost the same. It's non-granulating, transparent, moderate staining, light fastness 2. It is again PY3 Hansa Yellow 10G, but this time it's the other phthalo green that's been used. So it's PG36 phthalocyanine green yellow shade. So it's mixing the other phthalo green with lemon yellow. I think I just said phthalo blue with lemon yellow for this one. This is phthalo green and lemon yellow, and this is the other phthalo green and lemon yellow. So this one, because it's the green, it's the yellow shade of phthalo green, this should give us the more vibrant acid, yes, and it does, the more vibrant acid green than that one. And this, I think, is probably useless unless you're painting something hellishly psychedelic. I don't see that colour in nature, ever. And because it's a mixture, I'd find myself having to add either phthalo green or Hansa yellow to that to get it to the right shade. So why not just mix from those 2 colours to start with? Next, Permanent Green, another mix. This is again PY3 Hansa Yellow 10G, And again, phthalocyanine green blue shade, just like permanent green light that we had a little while ago. This is probably a darker mix where the ratio is slightly different. It's moderately staining, so it's going to have more phthalo green blue shade in it. It's light fastness 2, non-granulating and transparent. So this is going to be the same as permanent green light, just with more phthalo green blue shade in the mix. And indeed, that's exactly how it looks. So this is just phthalo green blue shade and a little bit of lemon yellow. Nothing special. Totally unnecessary convenience mix. Next we have phthalo green yellow shade, which is a non-granulating, transparent, heavily staining, light fastness 1 single pigment colour, which is phthalo green yellow shade, PG36. And compared to phthalo green blue shade that we had a while back, this one makes the more acidic greens. If you add yellow to it, you get more acidic, more vibrant greens that are more yellowish, obviously, and a little bit less towards the blue end of the scale. Very, very pretty pigment. Back onto convenience mixes now, and these are the convenience mixes you can always be excused. A lot of people use this one. This is Hooker's Green, which is non-granulating, semi-transparent, light fastness 2, low staining. It is PG36, which is phthalo green yellow shade, PY3, which is Hansa Yellow 10G, and PO49, which is quinacridone deep gold. This is one that a lot of people do use, and I use myself from a tube, because it's a very convenience mix that you can modify with a bit of yellow ochre to give you what you need. So lots of people do use Hooker's Green and Sap Green. These are useful convenience mixes for speed, especially when painting on plein air, because they're quite close to colours you see in nature, whereas these acid yellows really are not. Sap Green, which is kind of the counterpart to that, and this uses a very slightly different mix. This uses PO48, which is quinacridone gold, PG7, which is phthalocyanine green blue shade, so it's more blue biased already, and PY150, which is nickel azo yellow. It's granulating, transparent, moderately staining, and light fastness 1. So this is like a granulating, more blue or more earthy. Yeah, it's a more earthy, more granulating version of Hooker's Green, and slightly more yellow. It's got much more yellow in it because it's a quinacridone gold, not a quinacridone deep gold. So more of a yellow than a brown, I guess, as the undertone. Very pretty. Next one up, Chromic Oxide Green, aka Oxide of Chromium Green. It is granulating, opaque, one of few opaque watercolours. It is low staining and light fastness 1, and it uses PG17, which is Chromic Oxide Green. This is Lindsay Vierick's least favourite colour on the planet. It's one of those colours that's really crap on its own, but if you mix it with green gold, you can liven it up a little bit. It has a use, and that use, for me, is painting on Verdai, i.e. painting in green only. If you paint in just green and just do a sketch in just green, it's a very useful way to paint because it doesn't distract the eye. Green is a very easy colour to paint with, and the opacity of this one lends itself very well to single pigment, single colour paintings. But that's it, I can't find much other use for it really. And last, this is Rare Green Earth. I mistakenly wrote it as Rare Earth Green because I work with rare earth metals and I went into autopilot. It's light fastness 1, granulating, transparent and non-staining paint, and this uses PG23 Green Earth, so this is actually Terra Velta in most brands, and indeed as soon as I start wetting it, this is Terra Velta. Dark, granulating, earthy green, very, very, very useful for moss on the side of a tree or lichen, woodland scenes, beautiful. Terra Velta is a useful colour. And this is true Terra Velta, not that mix they're passing off as Terra Velta, which on drying looks absolutely nothing like it. Daniel Smith, why do you do that? So let's have a look back through the ones we've seen today, and I will zoom out because it will make it a little bit easier to show them to you. So we have the heavily granulating genuine smalt there. We have nice ultramarines, cobalt blue, phthalo green blue shade and red shade, so you can see the green and the red shade versions. Verditer blue, which is just that mix of cobalt and cerulean chromium together. Prussian blue, cerulean blue chromium. I'd probably go with that one if it was me. Manganese blue hue, looks nothing like manganese blue. Cobalt teal blue, which actually looks more like manganese blue than the manganese blue hue does. That's a bit more like what manganese blue looks like. Phthalo turquoise, which is a convenience mix. Ultramarine turquoise, ditto. Cobalt turquoise, really nice, useful granulating green there. And in the greens, we have Cascade green, which was this quite interesting, heavily granulating colour, which I'll zoom in on because it's quite pretty. Got these sort of orange granulations developing. Viridian, which is a must-have mixing green. Ditto phthalo green blue shade and phthalo green yellow shade. You really need to have both of those. Prussian green, which is not Prussian green, it's Prussian blue and cad yellow. I mean, that's nice, but you could mix it yourself. You don't need to buy it. Terravelta, that is not Terravelta. That looks nothing like Terravelta. That is Terravelta. That is genuine Terravelta. Get rid of that. Don't buy it. Use rare green earth instead. Cobalt green pale. Not ugly, but you know, very pale. Cobalt green is a useful green. Spring green, permanent green light. Phthalo green yellow, permanent green. I just wouldn't buy. I think they're garish. They are useless in that they don't resemble anything from nature. If you're going to buy convenience mixed tube greens, I would buy Hooker's green and sap green and mix them with a little bit of yellow ochre to make them more realistic still. Chromic oxide green, I think only has a real use in painting single colour. That's how I feel. If you use chromic oxide green, say below in the comments, tell me what you use it for. If you use it either alone or for mixing, I mean, I mix it with green gold and then it doesn't look too bad, and I use that mix for single colour or Vel dye paintings. Tell me what you do with it. Tell me how you enliven it. Tell me what you found a use for it for doing. And I would use Terravelta, this rare green earth. I would use this for moss, lichens, those little details. Maybe some people use chromic oxide green for it. I don't know. That's not me. I use that. So thank you all very much. And in the next instalment, we will be working our way through the remaining greens, of which there are not very many left, and heading into the neutrals, the earth colours, and we will be going about as far as the sort of sienna kind of area of the neutrals, the earth colours by then. Thank you all very much. Good evening.